Welcome to Qt Widgets and more. In this episode, I'll show you some of my Git hooks. They help me improve my code quality by avoiding that I commit fixmes into the commits or that I use constructs that I shouldn't be using. Let me show you. So what are Git hooks, you ask? Well, they are commands that you can get executed whenever you run certain Git commands. For example, git commit. You put them in the .git subdirectory of your project and, well, then Git will pick them up and execute them at the right point in time. With these, you can either do something to your code, you can make some changes, or you can just run, as you'll see most of my hooks do. So over here, I have a subdirectory called X. Sorry, I couldn't come up with a better name. I cloned this subdirectory into Y. So now I have a directory called Y, which is a completely new setup. And I have a setup script. Let's just run that right away. Git setup, Git setup, and the script is called setup. And it's in the files that you can download. There's a link just below me. First, I'll delete the old Git hooks directory. That's okay, I just did check out, so there's nothing in there. Next, I'll copy all the files in there. Sure. And finally, I will run git config, and that's observe the -- local, which makes sure that it only changes it in this Git repository. And it'll change it to the commit template. Fine, and now it's done. Let's just try and make some changes here. Let's make a change to main.cpp. It is rather small, so let's update it to be a proper example. Of course, this will not compile, but that's besides the point. I'll git add my main.cpp. That's cool. And I will commit it. Actually, yeah, I'll commit it and it'll say run git Clang format. So that's the first one. So in my setup, I use this git Clang format or Clang format to make sure that all my code looks properly. Go and look at the backlog of Qt Widgets and more. I think it was even the second episode that I put out. So okay, git Clang format. It tells me to run and Clang format. Here we are. Okay. It changed this file. I'll add my main.cpp and I'm ready to run git commit again. It'll bring up my editor and you can see that it actually pre-fills my editor with some stuff. And here's a short change. So yeah, this was just a test. And here's a longer description. And all of these lines will go out because they are just comments. But it helped me with stuff like, oh yeah, it's task ID. So Q Widgets and more 01, that is very likely the very first bug ever reported. And I'll save this and I'm done. That was the first Git hook in action, namely the one preventing me from checking things in if Clang format said there was any changes. You also saw the commit template, which is just a template that is useful. It tells me how long the first line can be because Git has rules for that. And it had this task ID, which I can never remember if I had to remember it without my commit template. In KDVTableView, I got a bunch of other flags that I can set. So I edited the template to my need in there. Let's go and look at what is inside this Git setup directory that you got from Qt Creator, from Qt Widgets and more's download directory. So in here, my Git setup subdirectory, it has a few files. It has the setup that we just ran, and it's just a simple bash script. Edit it to whatever you need. And as you can see here, it copies files over into .git. So .git/hooks, that's where your files are going to end up. You want me to make the font a bit bigger? That's okay, we can do that. Okay, so what else do we have in here? Well, we have a hooks subdirectory, and the hooks subdirectory got a few files. It has a pre-push. Let's try look at what that does. So that's a Python script that will be called whenever I want to push things upstream. And well, you don't need to read it, but what it basically does is that it will look for uncommitted files. So let's try to add something to our main.cpp. Well, replacing it seems instead. And let's touch a file here, and trust me, this episode or this particular segment of the code took me like half an hour before I realized it only looks for source files. So I just had a touch A, that doesn't do it, but a a.cpp. And now we can see if I say git commit minus bar here, well, it won't Clang format again. That's okay. Git Clang format. Git, well, I need to add it too. So git add minus p. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. And git commit. And now, oh, come on. There we are. And now, if I try to push this, and hopefully it will complain. And it did. It said to me, hey, I'm preventing a push because that you have git setup /hooks /a.cpp. That's just a file I just touched. Either stash it away or add it to your .git setup. So that hook is called or executed whenever I push, whenever I run the git push command. But however, for me, the most useful scripts are those that are executed on commit. So just when I type git commit, just before my files are actually committed, a bunch of scripts are executed, and let's have a look at them one after the other. So before we look at them though, let's just look at the script called pre-commit, because Git will not run a pre-commit-d directory. It'll just run a hook called pre-commit, but as you can see, super easy. It just looks at what is in pre-commit-d. So that's it'll simply run each of these in turns. And let's look at them. So clangformat.py, that's a Python script. We already saw that in action. There's not much going on in here. It runs clangformat --diff. And if that spits out anything, it will complain and exit 1, telling, hey, you shouldn't be committing this code here. Then there is check Fixme. Very simple script again. You can see it here. This time it's a bash script, so the script is either something I stole somewhere, or it is scripts that are just written without looking at much other. What it does here is that it runs git diff -- cache, and then it grabs for Fixme or TODO. And if there's one of these, then it'll print out saying, hey, you have a Fixme or TODO tag in there. That is likely not what you want. I suggest that you do like this instead, add a pending Jesper and blah, 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 and see, and this is the commit, or that's in our Jira, that's the ticket URL, and then in Jira I will put in a report that, hey, I should go and fix this or that. But let's just see what it looks like. Let me just edit my main.cpp again. It's moving further and further away, it seems. So in here it says yo, and now I'll just fix me this stuff. And of course these things would usually go in a comment like this. But now you can see if I say git add -p, I can add things. But if I do a git check-in -bar here again, it will tell me, hey, you have a Fixme in there, do not do that. And why do I have that? Well, I have this because whenever I make some larger changes, I will, instead of having a long list of things, well, I will also have that likely on a piece of paper, but in code, I will add Fixmes in different places for me to just tell myself, get back here, make a change here before you actually commit it. And you saw, if you watched carefully in my last episode, you saw I had this alias for git save, grep for it at least here, and that one runs this -no -verify, and that's what it says up here. So if I run -git commit with minus minus no minus verify, then it will ignore all the hooks and just continue on. So that's useful to do whenever I'm making changes as I go on. So these two first hooks that I showed you, the Clang format and the Fixme, you could simply copy them out and use them in your own setup, and that is likely exactly what you want to do. The next two, however, are very specific to me. So the first one I'll show you is about, let me see, QTableView. I should not use that in my UI files. And why is that? Well, because I have a KDVTableView. That is a QTableView subclass with some additions. And just to avoid that or more likely one of my coworkers, they just use a QTableView somewhere instead of the KDVTableView with all its additional features, they simply do not get a chance to commit it because the git commit hook will come and complain, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. Let me show you what that looks like. It is relatively simple. It's actually, you can see the same thing as the Fixme. All it does is that it checks for this pattern here, and it does that on UI files. So it checks for, or the UI files, you can see it up here, it checks whether it says class equal to either QTableView or class equal to QTreeView, and if that's the case, it complains about this. It's a super easy way to avoid these small mistakes sneaking in. So as I said, very, very useful to use hooks for stuff like that. Let me just show you the other one while I'm here. The other one is for currentDate, and I haven't been not much different, let's put it that way, from the other thing. This one runs on anything, and it checks whether I have a QDate : currentDate, if I call that. And here's the story behind why I do not want that in my code. A lot of my code is about dates, and I want to be able to unit test things. So I don't want in my unit test to rely on that things are 3 days old and then update my test data all the time. So I have a method that is called, as you can see down here, dateUtils : today. dateUtils : today will return QDate : currentDate if I'm running this in production. But if I'm running it on my test setup, then it will return May 15th, 2014 or something. And it will always return that so that I can go and say 3 days back is, well, whatever 3 days back is. Now that I whet your appetite on hooks, go and create your own hooks. Be creative, and especially make sure that you do make it as difficult for your coworkers to mess up your code base as possible. Remember my hook that prevented people from using QTableView and QTreeViews? But also go and get inspired on the internet. Just Google for Git hook collections and you'll find lots and lots of hooks for many different languages, for many different setups. If you find something that are super useful for C++, you know what to do. Make a comment below this video, and then I and everybody else will be able to enjoy it. You've been watching Qt Widgets and more. I am still and will always be Jesper Pedersen, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next episode, we'll be talking about coding again. Until then, have a great time.